Well, hi everyone, and welcome into this exciting webinar where we'll be exploring the science behind Rejuvenate, which is the flagship product of Aevum Labs. So my name is Lisa Tamati, and I'm honoured to be your moderator today for today's event. And we'll be delving into this revolutionary product and how it supports healthy aging by targeting the root causes of the immune system decline and chronic inflammation. But let me begin by sharing a bit of a deeply personal story about why I wanted to be a founder of Aevum Labs. Now, this journey started with my own mother, a wonderful, fragile, and aging woman who inspired me to dedicate years to understanding what truly supports health as we age. And like many of you, I've witnessed the challenges of aging firsthand. And I wanted to create something that was safe yet profoundly effective, and something that would nurture her gut health, bolster her immune resilience, and lower systemic chronic inflammation, all of which are pivotal to longevity and vitality. And I could not find anything on the market that would really do that. So during this journey, I encountered the groundbreaking research of Dr. David Furman and his team at Stanford University and the Buck Institute. Now, they spearheaded the 1000 Immunomes Project, and this is the largest longitudinal study of the human immune system and to date. So they've been going for over 15 years. And their findings are really extraordinary. The immune system doesn't just fight off infections, it's really foundational to healthy aging. It turns out that a dysregulated immune system is often due to immunosenescence, which is the aging of the immune system. And it's at the core of nearly all 14 hallmarks of aging. So when the immune system is compromised, it creates a cascade of dysfunctions that accelerate aging across the entire body. Now, the exciting part of this research is that we can positively influence the immune system to slow and even reverse these effects. And Dr. Furman's research showed that by targeting inflammation and immune aging, we can address chronic diseases, improve resilience, and even influence cellular repair mechanisms. Now, this discovery sort of became my mission, and it's the driving force behind Aevum Labs. So I teamed up with some world-leading people who you're going to meet a couple of them today. And we have Dr. Claycomb from Quantec, we have Mike Eyres from Pharma NZ, and we have Peter Lehrke, who is my co-founder at Aevum Labs and also a biochemist, and he is going to be sharing about Immunel, and Dr. Rod, they're going to be talking about each of the ingredients actually. And then we have one other person who's not with us today, who we're doing a separate webinar with, Dr. Elizabeth Youth, who is a world-renowned cellular health and regenerative medicine expert who has been advising us. So I'm really, really excited for today's webinar. There's a lot to cover, and what Rejuvenate does is it really is it's born of a passion, and it's rigorous scientific research behind it. It's designed with the most advanced ingredients to support the immune function, lower systemic inflammation, and promote overall health. And it really brings together some powerhouse ingredients that we're going to be introducing to you today. And those ingredients are immune defense protein, Immunel, Carnosic acid, and Kawakawa. So we're going to be diving into the depths of the science behind this, and we're going to be starting off with immune defense protein, which is something that Dr. Rod Claycomb and his colleagues at Quantec have been developing and studying for the last 15 years. So welcome to the show, Dr. Rod. It's wonderful to have you back. I've interviewed you a few times, and today we're going to rinse and repeat and talk about immune defense protein. Can you give us a brief synopsis on what is immune defense protein and how does it affect the body?
Right. Well, whenever I'm introducing immune defense protein, or as we call it, IDP, I always start with nature, because IDP is one of the only natural health product ingredients that actually is designed by nature, but also used the way we use it in the same way that nature has designed it to be used. And just let me explain what I mean by that. It all starts with the cow's mammary gland, the source of mother's milk for all mammals, of course. But we source IDP from cow's milk just because it's a good source for that. But the inside of the mammary gland of a cow is lined with skin. So it's like an internal skin. It lacks that tough epidermis that you have on your external skin. So it's quite a vulnerable tissue inside the mammary gland. And that internal skin is what actually synthesizes and secretes milk. And but that internal skin is constantly challenged by bacteria and pathogens and viruses and other things in the environment. Milk over time has developed this powerful defense system, I guess you'd call it, to protect that internal skin primarily from infection and inflammation. And it does that through various bioactivities that I'll mention. But cows are milked twice a day, 305 days a year. So think about it, it's 610 chances minimum a year that the mammary gland of a cow has a chance of getting infected
Right.
by environmental pathogens. And if you think about the clinical mastitis rate in the dairy industry worldwide, it's about 10%. So that automatically gets you thinking there's something in milk that is pretty good at protecting that internal skin from infection and inflammation. And interesting. So that's what we've worked on, like you said, over the past 15 years. We've discovered that internal defense system. We now extract it from milk and turn it into this ingredient that we call IDP. IDP remains exactly in the same form that it is inside the cow's milk to begin with. And if you think about cow's milk, it's mostly water, 85% water, but it's only 5% protein. And most of those proteins, about 80% of those proteins are casein. So, think cheese making when you think of casein. But of that, a remaining 20%, which is what we call the whey proteins in milk, about 80% of those proteins are inactive proteins, mainly made up of two individual proteins. They're rich sources of amino acids. That's why whey proteins used for bodybuilding and muscle growth and support. But it's the remaining 20% of that 20% that is this immune defense fraction. So if you think about it, it's a very small but extremely powerful, like I mentioned, defense system in milk. And we extract that system. We now know there's more than 50 bioactive whey proteins in that fraction, all of which have an important function in, like I said, protecting that internal skin of the cow's mammary gland from infection and inflammation. And so what we've looked for in human health applications is how can we use this on surfaces of the body, internal or external, to do exactly the same thing it's been designed by nature to do in the cow.
Wow. And so it's the synergistic effect of these 50 bioactives together. And some of these bioactives are things like lactopherrin, which is, I think, 40% of the IDP,
That's
and
correct.
lactoperoxidase, and then a suite of other sort of more minor bioactive proteins.
Correct.
And lactopherrin has been known for decades as being this wonder thing that actually, the list is very short of what it doesn't influence. But what you discovered really, and how you actually fell into the space, was by studying lactopherrin and then trying to refine it and make it better, and then realizing it was this combination that was even more powerful. Can you go into that little bit of that story?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. We started out looking at lactopherrin, and like you said, there's been plethora of publications over the decades about lactopherrin and what it can do. And I'd say what it can't do, but there's not a lot of things that
Yeah.
that discovered it can't do. But lactopherrin is an individual protein. It's probably been the most studied of the IDP proteins because it's the most abundant in the natural ratio of these bioactive whey proteins in cow's milk. So, like you said, it's about 40%, and lactoperoxidase, the other one you mentioned, is 18%, and the rest could just kind of join the team. And it really is a team, and that's what we discovered. We were trying to look at the antimicrobial activity of lactopherrin, and when we take these IDP proteins, we put them into a column, that's a little plastic beads column, and you can separate the proteins into their individual fractions. And we kept getting results that showed the more and more we purified the lactopherrin, the less and less the antimicrobial activity became. So we started looking at some of the other fractions, and the same thing held true for them. And ultimately, that led us to what we have patented now, which is it's the synergistic activity of all these proteins working together that's required. So think of it like a football team.
Mm.
And I'm American, so I can talk American football, right? So lactopherrin's like the quarterback, but if you just had a team of a quarterback, he'd get killed.
Wouldn't work.
It wouldn't
Yeah.
work. He needs some linemen, he needs some running backs, he needs some wide receivers, so on and so forth. And that's what all these other 50 plus proteins do for lactoferrin. And so it led us to start thinking, well, what about all of these lactoferrin publications over the years? Well, as some of them are decades old, and who knows how pure the lactoferrins were in those studies. And so
Right.
we definitely don't discount those studies. They're real. They've been done by reputable scientists. But we just kind of wonder now, with what we've done over the last 15 years, was the impurities in those lactoferrin fractions
Actually
actually
key.
helping to get the results and make lactoferrin shine? Like all the linemen and all the running backs. The quarterback's the best paid player, right? So
Yeah, yeah. It's all about the star of the show, but actually it's the synergistic. And what we find often in nature is when you have a complex of things, that it is more powerful than the individual parts. That's quite common in natural medicine, if you like. And if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, nature has developed this ultimate product to protect the cow from inflammation and infection, and nature knows best, right? It's developed this inner synergy for a reason, and it's probably got more intelligence than we do, even our top scientists. So maybe using the synergistic blend. Now, if we go and talk about so what are some of the benefits that we can as humans get from IDP? What are some of the sort of benefits for our immune system, for our gut health, for cellular health? Can you sort of elaborate on that?
So most of our work over these 15 years has been spent characterizing the fraction that we extract. And we've characterized that in many ways. There's kind of a 4A story here. I mentioned the antimicrobial. That's how the original discovery was made. We then went to look at because there was a lot of lactoferrin research around anti-inflammation. And so we thought, wonder if this same synergistic story holds true with inflammation. It did. We looked at antioxidant activity. And most recently, during COVID, when the whole lab got shut down, we decided, I wonder what antiviral looks like. So, and it turns out the same story there too. So, so those 4A's, kind of antimicrobial, antiviral, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, with a antimicrobial twist that we've recently discovered and patented, and that is what we call selective antimicrobial activity. So for some reason, again, it probably comes back to nature. You wouldn't want a defense system that killed commensal bacteria. IDP is quite effective, has very low minimum inhibitory concentrations for killing pathogenic bacteria like Staph aureus and E. coli and others, but it doesn't have such good activity against killing commensal organisms like bifidobacteria, lactobacilli, strep salivarius in the oral cavity, epidermidis, and hominis on the skin. And so, so it's a selectively antimicrobial activity. And so back to humans, where does it help? How does that help? Well, your body has a defense system as well. And most of the defense of the body's systems come at a surface level. So that's where invading pathogens and organisms get in.
Exactly. Yep.
So you breathe them in, they touch your skin, you eat them, they get into your gut. And we decided to start looking at mechanisms, how these fundamental basic mechanisms of activity translated to human health benefits. And so we've looked at everything from using IDP as an ingredient in killing the bacteria that cause acne on the skin, and reduce inflammation when you get acne, to oral cavity. Most recently, we've been looking at the gut. And the gut, the internal lining of the gut is very similar to the internal lining, like I mentioned, of the mammary gland. It has tight junctions. And we now know, we're just publishing a paper right now on the activity of the IDP proteins to help heal those tight junctions in the gut. So when you get leaky gut, those junctions break apart. These proteins have the combination of activities creates a functionality in the gut that seals those tight junctions back up. And so you can think of your immune system, a big part of your immune system is the lining of the gut, the Peyer's patches in the upper gut. And we're now discovering more and more about how IDP is working at that level to confer that frontline immune defense on the body.
This is absolutely crucial because those barriers, whether it's the barriers internally between like the blood-brain barrier through to the gut barrier, and I don't think you've studied the blood-brain barrier per se yet, but all the barriers are connected, generally speaking, and barrier function and supporting barrier health is really, really important. And it's so important when you have leaky gut, and you do, as practitioners, you might do a microbiome test and see someone's zonulin levels are, through the roof or something, and they've got leaky gut. You're aging your body. You're speeding up the aging of the organs, of the brain. You're deteriorating quicker. You're causing autoimmune issues, possibly. All of these things that are negative downstream effects that have massive systemic, chronic systemic inflammation, which is really what the aging of the immune system is all about. So for me, that was a really key one that the studies that you've done about barrier health, because I think that's absolutely crucial and something that practitioners can actually go, okay, here's something that's going to help with leaky gut, and that's a very common problem. And we'll be able to, I'd love to see some clinical studies on did it actually reduce zonulin, but that is something that we could probably look as practitioners when we're doing microbiome testing and seeing if that's actually having an effect. The IDP is also like very powerful. It supports the microbiome, doesn't it? And the gut-brain axis. You've talked about, in China they talk a lot about the gut and the brain as being, the second brain. How does it interact there, and what does it do on that sort of front?
Well, it all comes back to that bioactivities that I mentioned and the surface actions of them. That's quite important because most of these proteins in IDP are quite large proteins. They don't get broken down in the gut of the human or the cow, really, or anything that's drinking them. So they remain active into the gut.
Wow.
But the important thing is they don't cross the gut unless you have leaky gut. But intentionally, they don't cross the gut. So all the activity they have is at the surface mucosal level in the gut. But there's quite important signaling mechanisms that go on at the gut mucosa. And it's now known that a lot of these proteins can actually signal things to happen on the blood side of the system. And,
Wow.
and that in turn, we believe, can lead to other things, other systemic effects from consuming the supplement that contains it. So cognition, there's a lot of published, again, we always come back to what's been done. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's been good papers on the cognition benefits of lactopherrin, for example. And so that's some future work we're going to think about doing of, again, does the sum of the whole, is it better than the individual players?
Yeah. And what are some of the other research pieces that you've done? So with immune response, for example, to vaccines and things like that?
We're just about to publish. In fact, hot off the press, we've just got approval to publish this week, actually.
Excellent. Wonderful.
Yeah. So watch out for this. But we've just finished a study this year on combinations, kind of like food as medicine. And so, the industry is full of this combat between pharma and natural health products. We decided, well, why fight each other? Let's see if something can work together. And so we looked at a clinical study model where we were combining IDP supplementation with influenza vaccination. We knew IDP had antiviral characteristics against influenza A and B. And so we thought, let's see. And we knew that came from IDP proteins blocking the spike proteins that allowed the influenza virus to get into the human cells. So we decided, let's see if this carries through to clinical research. We supplemented with IDP for 4 weeks before an influenza vaccination. And we looked at influenza-specific IgGs in the blood before, during, and after vaccination for 4 weeks. And one of the measures that's used in that vaccination space for effectiveness of vaccines is looking at specific IgGs in the blood. How high do they get post-vaccination, and how long do they stay after vaccination?
Elevated. Yep.
And so we supplemented with a placebo. It was a double-blinded placebo-controlled study. We used 2 doses of IDP, a normal 50 milligram dose or a super 200 milligram dose. And in both the IDP groups, we saw elevated influenza-specific IgGs in the blood 2 weeks and 4 weeks post-vaccination,
Oh,
2 to 4 times higher than in the placebo group, but just had the vaccination only.
that's that's amazing. So
Yeah.
that's better than the vaccine, or like it's giving you more of a response.
Well, it soups
And
up the
improving
vaccine,
it,
I
soups it
guess.
up. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
for people who are older, we know that older adults don't generally react that well to vaccines because the thymus involution and the immune function not being what it used to be. And so this would be another good adjunct to add to, people who are
Mm.
getting older to support their immune system. This is one of the reasons why I wanted IDP in our formulation. And just anecdotally, my mum had an E. coli infection last year, and this is not a clinical study. This is just an anecdotal story. And her lymphocyte count was on the floor, absolutely, atrociously low. And by within days of putting IDP into the mix, and we were, doing other things as well, but it was when I put the IDP in that I saw their lymphocyte count go up. So it's something that perhaps practitioners could observe
Well,
and have a look if
that's
there's.
interesting because
Yeah.
we're just doing a study right now.
Yep.
We're trying to see. So this was with an intentional influenza vaccination. A vaccination mimics a natural infection from something. It's just a way to control a natural infection.
Yep.
So now we're looking at natural infections. So you got to go to a lot more subjects in a clinical study with natural infections because you don't know what your infection rate's going to be going into the study. We've decided to go into an early child care education center where there's a lot of infection. They're like peaches.
Yeah, aren't they?
And so that stacks the deck in our favor. But yeah, we're going to be looking at does the results we had with the influenza study carry through to natural infections and reduce the severity and occurrence of the infections or reinfections in that case too.
Wow. Well, I just saw in my own blood work the lymphocyte count go up, and in the blood work of my mother immediately it went up, and I'd been fighting for that for years
Hmm.
because she'd had a cancer history and so on and so forth. So that was really super exciting for me. And yeah, that'll be great to see more research come out. Are there any other things, Dr. Rob, before we go to Peter and the Immunel story, that we've missed? Any studies that I missed, or any of the other efficacies of IDP in the body? Is there anything that we've not
Well,
covered?
we've done a lot of work in the oral care and skincare space too, but I don't think we need to cover those at this stage. I think, with what your product is going to be aiming for,
Yep.
I think those are the most important ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got, protection in the barriers. We've got, yeah, increasing the response of the immune system. And it's just really going to be a very beneficial thing for people to put into the mix. So Dr. Rod, thank you for your presentation on IDP and talking about that. It's I was super excited. I think it's the other one thing I did want to say, it's very safe. This comes from a dairy product. Now, a lot of people will be asking, people with lactose intolerance going to have a problem with this particular product? What's the story there?
Good question. So there's two dairy consumption things that happen in the market. One is lactose intolerance. The other was dairy allergies. Um, Lactose intolerance isn't an allergy. It just means you lack the enzyme to break down lactose. So I'll address that one first. The way we extract IDP proteins from milk, first of all, they're proteins, and lactose is a sugar. And lactose is a lot smaller than IDP. Basically, the process we use to extract the IDP from milk doesn't touch the lactose at all. So the lactose just passes through, and so there's zero lactose in IDP. The second issue is a little bit more relevant because it's a protein-based thing, and that's the milk allergens. And milk allergies can come from any of the proteins, obviously. Some people can have casein allergies even, but most of the milk allergies are caused by those inactive whey proteins, beta-lactoglobulin and alpha-lactalbumin. And again, those are not extracted in the IDP process. There's trace amounts of those in there, but really, really small. And so basically, we in 12, 13 years now of selling IDP products, we've never had a reported incidence in our
Wow.
adverse event system of anybody being intolerant to IDP or being allergic to it.
Yeah, that's really reassuring to know. So yeah, no, well, thank you, Dr. Rod, for that wonderful insights into IDP. And now we're going to go to Peter Lehrke, and Peter is a biochemist. He's also co-founder with me at Aevum Labs and a mentor and friend and brilliant man. And he is an expert in Immunel. So we're going to be talking about Immunel, which is the second ingredient that comes in our Rejuvenate product. Peter, tell us, what is Immunel and why did we put this in into Rejuvenate?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, Immunel is also a colostrum extract, but a different form of colostrum extract to the proteins that Dr. Rod has just been talking about. So Immunel contains components such as lysozyme, growth factors, IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, and TGF beta 2, transforming growth factor beta 2. This group of compounds called proline-rich polypeptides, sialic acid, and nucleotides. So it is a different and precise fraction from colostrum, with these minor components which all combine to assist in the surveillance and the migration of immune cells, macrophage and dendritic cell maturation, which directs better antigen presenters, natural killer cell activation, NK cell activation.
That's a key. Yep.
Yes, and phagocytic activity. So all of that means it enhances the innate immune functions. And this has been tested in vitro and also in vivo, including clearance of pathogenic microorganisms.
Yep. And let's just pause on the where was it going? With the, no, I'll let you carry on. I've just lost my train of thought there. I didn't want to pause on one of them. Yeah, carry on, Peter.
So I'll just go through the studies that were done with Immunel, and it's had over 10 years of research on its functionality and consistency. So first of all, in cell culture, there's pro and anti-inflammatory properties, immunomodulation effects, and antioxidant effects. So they've been tested in cells. In animals, antibacterial and antiviral. And in humans, we've done an acute effects study. So I'll talk through those a little bit more. First of all, the findings. What does Immunel do? It supports phagocytosis. So that's the phagocytes engulfing foreign bodies and bacteria and pathogens. It activates natural killer cells. It increases the bacterial clearance. It reduces viral load, and it also reduces adherence to epithelial cells. So these things pretty much work in tandem with IDP, as Dr. was talking about. This effect on the epithelial and the surfaces is enhanced with these smaller molecules. In the natural killer cell study, we looked at CD69 expression on natural killer cells and compared this to a control and to colostrum whey. And we found that there was a doubling of the activation of an expression of CD69 on these natural killer cells compared to whey, colostrum, sorry. Then in the study on bacterial clearance, we focused on the pneumonia bacteria in the lung, and there was a 70% reduction in this with Immunel. In the influenza model, we were looking at reduced viral load, and we had a 64% reduced viral load after oral treatment. So then we moved to the acute effects of Immunel in vivo, and this was a double-blinded, placebo-controlled crossover study. We had a 1-week washout period between the placebo and then the Immunel. And in the test panel, we looked at white blood cells, granulocytes, monocytes, lymphocytes, natural killer cells, and T cells in circulation and activation phenotype and a phagocytic capacity. And we also looked at the cytokine profile. So, yeah, the results basically showed that it supports phagocytosis and it improves these clearance rates.
And when we look at, like what colostrum, is a, if we just take a step back, Peter, and talk about colostrum in itself, it's the first food that a mammal gives its baby, and it transfers all of the immune factors. So in humans, some of that is transferred through the placenta, but in cows and in other mammals, the baby's basically born without an immune system, and it must have colostrum in order for it to develop its immune system and for the development of its organs and brain and so on and so forth. And the problem with standard colostrum is that it's not standard. Well, like you don't know the quality. When was that colostrum taken? Was it in the first day or the third day or so that was one of the great things too with IDP. It's a standardized product that we can actually measure each batch. We know what the effective bioactives are in there and the amounts that are in there. But colostrum is an absolute crucial thing for mammals, and it transfers all those growth factors, those immunoglobulins, in this case, the nucleotides, the sialic acid, all the stuff that you just mentioned, across to the baby. And what they found is that it also benefits older people. But this Immunel is not just your standard colostrum, is it? It's a very concentrated, taking out all of the extra fat, the lactose. There's a small amount of lactose, I believe, still in Immunel. But most of the stuff has been taken out that we don't want, because we don't need a heck of a lot more fat and sugar in our diet, do we? But we wanted these concentrated proteins and these concentrated bioactives. So yeah, what's your take on the whole colostrum story? Because you've worked with colostrum for decades, actually.
Yes, I have. Yeah, I take colostrum every day, and because anecdotally I feel the benefit of it. However, when you think about colostrum, it is life's first food, and so it has to provide a whole food. So it needs to be the macronutrients. It needs to be basically like an infant formula for the calf. It's got to provide the lactose for the sugars for the energy and the fats, and so that and the other proteins. So they're in there as a whole food. However, for an adult like us, a human adult taking this, we don't need that because we get that through our food. And so that's why we've honed in on the bioactive smaller components for their, well, virtually their pharmaceutical benefits rather than their nutritional benefits.
Yeah.
And I think there's a wealth of research still to come around all of the combinations of these minor components and how they teach the immune system selectivity. So colostrum has been historically, it's been presented as a form of immunity boosting. Mm-hmm. And the focus has been on IgG, the immunoglobulin components. Mm. However, it is really just a marker of the quality of the colostrum. The IgG is a measure of the potency of the immunoglobulin fraction. But all of the other minor components, as Dr. Rod was talking about, that are in IDP, all of the minor, some of them not even characterized yet. the protein fractions. Likewise, all of the non-protein minor molecules. There hasn't yet been a scientific explanation around why colostrum reduces immunity, improves immunity, but reduces allergies and autoimmune diseases, right? So if you have an overactive immune system, then you're less targeted, and your immune system can then attack the body's organs, right? And so
totally.
Autoimmunities. Now, my daughter is a really good example of how colostrum has actually helped reduce allergies. She used to have milk allergies as a teenager when she started getting interested in coffee and the latte she enjoyed, but she would flare up with flushed cheeks and gut issues because of the milk components. When she took colostrum, she became more and more tolerant of the milk proteins. So suddenly she could actually have a latte if she was taking colostrum. We don't yet understand all of this, but we do think, well, I personally think that some of these minor components are helping in teaching the immune system, teaching the selectivity and talking to the various components. There's a talking chemistry in the body of the biochemicals working in tandem and helping to be more targeted, more selective. I think it'll be watch this space for more research in this, but we think by combining the minor components of Immunel with all the bioproteins in IDP, there's got to be some synergy there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful combination, isn't it? And as we get older, our immune system sort of become what was our friend when we were younger actually turns on us when we're older, and autoimmunity becomes much more prevalent, and our surveillance for things like cancer becomes less, we're less surveillant, we don't have as much killer cell activity. So the fact that the killer cells, natural killer cell activation happens with Immunel, and that was strongly shown in the studies, and those will all be referenced below in the notes. The CD69 activation, so that's where the killer cells are actually turned into killer cells, and they go after the baddies, and they go after the cancer cells, and they go after the viruses, and they go after infected cells. The activation was much more when immediately after taking Immunel. There was studies that showed just within a couple of hours that there was a response. It's an immediate response through taking Immunel. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And there's just sort of that sort of leads into the term and the point around as we get older, our immune system becomes sleepy, senescent. So the immunosenescence, or the zombie cells of our body don't get cleared as well. So it'd be interesting to know whether the components in colostrum are assisting with either the reduction in immunosenescence or the clearance of these zombie cells. So it would be good to do a study in that space as well.
Yeah, there's more to come. There's definitely more to come. And one of the other recent studies, G-CSF, which was stem cells. We have stem cells, right? And Immunel was shown to increase stem cell activation and honing to the right place to do its job. So stem cells basically are what the body uses to repair itself. They're running around our body at all times. And as we get older, of course, we get less stem cell release. And so this has been shown to actually increase the stem cell activation. And that was a major finding. For me, when I read that study, I was like, that's gold. That's real gold, because anything that supports our stem cells is really important as we get older, and helps the stem cells find their way to the site that needs help, needs repair. So yeah, that study was a very interesting one, and that was the most recent one to come out, isn't it? Yeah,
that is very interesting. So granulocyte colony stimulating factor, G-CSF, was shown to be increased, and this is related to the release of stem cells. So the stem cells in our body are kept in their niches in the bone marrow and in the adipose tissue, and we don't yet know what the chemical signals are that cause the release of these stem cells, but they do relate to inflammatory factors. So when the body gets a challenge, when there's an injury to a body, part of the inflammatory response is release of these cytokines, and they travel around the body. And there is some signaling that happens to release stem cells from these niches in the adipose tissue and in the bone marrow and travel to the site of injury, where they can then differentiate to become replacement cells in the injured area. And this is just really fascinating area. So I was co-author on a paper in this space that showed that certain oral nutraceuticals you could take would stimulate the release of these stem cells into the body. And colostrum was part of that formulation that we did that study on.
Yeah.
So yes, likewise, we are surrounded by unsurmountable opportunity in the studies in this space. Actually, it's a matter of where do we go and where do we target and where do we put the because they're expensive to do these studies. Where do we put the money to direct the the best information flow out of that?
Yeah, but the current studies are really enough for us to be jumping headfirst into this formulation and putting them together. The synergy of these is going to be really powerful. So anything else that we've missed, Peter, on the Immunel story? In interest of time, we probably need to get to Kawakawa and the Carnosic acid part of the puzzle. Anything that I've missed in my travels on the Immunel story?
No, very good questioning. I think we've covered that. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful, Peter. Well, thank you for that one. Now I'm going to introduce you to Mike Eyres, who is a retired winemaker and a naturopath, registered naturopath, a medical herbalist. He's the vice president of the New Zealand Medical Herbalists, 10 years experience in consulting with companies in the New Zealand food and dietary supplement space. And his key areas of clinical interest is in the chronic inflammatory conditions and autoimmunity, born from his own experience of managing IBD for 30 years. Through natural medicine. So welcome, Mike. Lovely to have you here today. And you're going to be helping us tell the story a little bit about Kawakawa and Carnosic acid, which make up the other two components of Rejuvenate, our Aevum Labs formula Rejuvenate. So let's start a little bit with the Kawakawa. Mike, what can you tell us about Kawakawa? So, what is it?
Yeah. So Kawakawa is a New Zealand native. It's a Taonga species, so it was used by Maori for a long time as food and medicine, and really as a tool for spiritual practices. So yeah, really interesting plant. So it's a member of the pepper family. So it is actually closely related to kava that people might be familiar with. So kava, they use the root. Kawakawa, we use the leaf.
Yeah, and it's Piper excelsium, I think is the official word for it. And,
yes.
and it's bioactive compounds, things like, I can never say this word, but myristicin.
Myristicin, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's, the myristicin is an interesting compound that we know is in Kawakawa. It's part of the essential oil component, but there is a huge raft of phytochemicals that we now know in Kawakawa. It's only been recently characterized, so all the individual phytochemicals do is still being teased out. But we do know from the studies of myristicin and some of the polyphenolic compounds that are lignans, so they're also really hard to pronounce, yangambin and diamgambin. So we know a little bit about what those individual phytochemicals do, which has given us glimpses to really validate the traditional uses of Kawakawa.
I love it when ancient traditional native herbs and things that have been used around the world are now being validated scientifically. I mean, the experts back in the day, they knew what it did. They knew that Kawakawa had anti-inflammatory and gut soothing, and it was a tonic for so many things that it was used for, pain, so many things. But now to have some validation, and again, more studies are needed and more will be evolving over the next couple of decades, no doubt. But it's really a powerful anti-inflammatory. It really has effects on inflammation and immunity and overall sort of health. It helps with the gut health. One of the main things is COX-2 inhibition. Can you explain what is COX-2 perhaps as an enzyme, and yeah, how does that work?
So COX-2 is an enzyme really critical as part of the arachidonic cascade. So this is the inflammatory response in the body where arachidonic acid is turned into prostaglandins. So when we can inhibit COX-2, and it's got a similar enzyme LOX as well, and both Carnosic acid from rosemary and Kawakawa have been demonstrated to do this. So the inhibition helps just calm inflammation down, but compared to pharmaceutical COX-2 inhibitors like ibuprofen and NSAIDs, we actually have more of a modulatory effect when we're using Kawakawa and Carnosic acid. So that is that they tend to modulate more of the cytokines. So rather than that blocking the enzyme and just stopping inflammation, they more modulate its response. So inflammation is in itself not a terrible thing, especially in an acute sense.
Absolutely.
It's when it's continually activated and becomes systemic and ongoing that becomes a problem due to the oxidative stress, which we can talk about how these plants help with that as well. So when we're really trying to use these plants to modulate those responses through reductions in the cytokines like IL-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and IL-1 beta, we're really trying to resolve that inflammation to get the body back into a normal state.
Yeah, because this is the key, right? We want IL-6, we want TNF alpha in the first instance when we have an insult, but we don't want these to stay chronically elevated because they cause a lot of collateral damage. And that's what's happening as we're getting older. They are the so-called cytokines of aging, the interleukin-6 and TNF alpha and interleukin-1 beta. And it also improves the Kawakawa actually increases the interleukin-10, which is sort of that modulatory anti-inflammatory effect, right? And so we get this initial immune response, which we want, the TNF alpha and interleukin-6, but then we want it to be brought back down, and we want the IL-10 to go up at that stage and also be that sort of resolving, helping with the anti-inflammatory. So and when we use a pharmaceutical COX-2 inhibitor, it blocks everything. So it's sort of like, it's this is a better way of doing it, really, a more natural way of doing it.
So it's that small nudge, right? Rather than the big heavy hammer, which you might need the big heavy hammer as well
initially.
sometimes. But,
but it's a good alternative because obviously NSAIDs and COX-2 inhibitors have a lot of downsides, that we don't want. So that's really, so for people with chronic inflammatory conditions such as autoimmune diseases or metabolic disorders, Kawakawa can really help reduce the systemic inflammation and alleviate related symptoms. So that's really important for the aging populations. And where chronic inflammation is, as Dr. David Furman at the 1000 Immunomes Project sort of pointed out, that is the thing, like systemic chronic inflammation. If you think of it, he had a lovely graphic with systemic chronic inflammation as the cog in the middle that turns all the wheels for all the other things, from obesity to insulin resistance to everything else, is at the core a systemic chronic inflammation. So we want to get those inflammatory markers back down into a level that's really where it should be. So working on that IL-6, TNF alpha, interleukin-1 beta, really, really key. what else can Kawakawa, what's it been used for traditionally?
So we really think of Kawakawa as a gut herb primarily. So traditionally it was used for almost everything actually, but yeah, very key was any problems with the gut. I think more related to the immune system was its use as a tonic herb. So it's known to be used in cases of debility and for recovery. So I think that's really interesting when looking at this in this space. But yeah, primarily as a gut herb. So we know the mix of phytochemicals has that antispasmodic effect, anti-inflammatory and pain relieving. So probably really its key effects are really localized to the gut, which as we know and as Rod talked about is really key to good immune balance. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also, the activation of the NRF2 pathway, Kawakawa is, and Carnosic acid actually, activates and upregulates the body's endogenous antioxidant defenses, including sort of glutathione and superoxide dismutase and catalase. Yeah, what's your take on that?
Yeah. So this is really interesting area, and again, is really developing, and we're just seeing more and more information on this. So for a long time, we thought all of our natural products and our plant products and polyphenols, etc., really work through direct antioxidant mechanisms, which may still be true and definitely localized in the gut. They'll be doing that. But yeah, the world of NRF2 has been really interesting. So we now know that, especially polyphenolics, and it's been demonstrated for carnosic acid from rosemary as well, and the compounds in Kawakawa, so they activate NRF2. So NRF2 is known as the master regulator of the body's antioxidant mechanisms. And so why that is because it's a transcription factor. So it actually turns genes on that, as you said, Lisa, just activate all those other enzymes. And so you're producing your own antioxidant defenses like superoxide dismutase and glutathione.
Yeah, so and free radical scavenging, so like your oxidative stress levels, which of course go up when you have inflammation and all of that sort of thing. So and there's some amazing things that upregulate the NRF2, and it's really a key pathway because it's so much more powerful than the direct antioxidant effect, which has its place, right? We want our vitamin A's and E's and C's and things, but these ones are like using the body's own machinery, which is a lot more powerful than the shorter acting. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against vitamin C's. I've done tons of lectures on that and things like that. But it's using the body's own systems really to upregulate.
And super important for the immune system because, like you say, that systemic inflammation or chronic inflammation creates that reactive oxygen species, causes that oxidative stress, and immune cells are really good at creating that stress for themselves. So if we can support that antioxidant mechanisms, that's just going to really help the immune system to stay balanced and not get out of whack and become chronic.
Yeah, I think that's a real key factor because the immune system, the stuff that happens when the immune system is activated from a virus or a pathogen or a bacteria or whatever the case is, or an injury, then it causes a lot of collateral damage, right? It causes a lot of oxidative stress, and we need the responses in the beginning, and then we want to dial them back and bring them back into line, and then we need our antioxidant defenses, our NRF2s, to come along and sort of mop up the mess that's created, if you like, and increase clear out the hydrogen peroxides and get the superoxide dismutase working, and breaking all that down. And Kawakawa is very powerful at doing that. I mean, I've just had my Kawakawa tea this morning, that it's something that was part of my family's history. We have Kawakawa tea every day, and have done for a long time because it supports everything. Now let's flip and go over to the last ingredient in Rejuvenate's, in Aevum Labs Rejuvenate product, and that is rosemary extract, which has some crossover, as we said, with the NRF2 pathway being also upregulated with rosemary extract. But it's derived, tell us what is carnosic acid, where does it come from?
Yeah, so carnosic acid is a diterpenoid, and it's one of the components of rosemary. So again, like rosemary is an interesting pick for an immune product. We think of it more for its antioxidant activity, and more recently, a lot of brain health.
Yeah, brain health. Yep.
And yeah, so for immune system support, it's an interesting one. And this is really based on pretty new, exciting research from the 1000 Immunomes Project that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And this is really focusing on carnosic acid's effect on CXCL9, which we can talk about a little bit more. But yeah, and again, there's many other actives in rosemary that have various effects. So rosmarinic acid and ursolic acid, those will still be in the rosemary extract that we have used for this product. But we've really focused on standardizing to carnosic acid because of this emerging evidence on CXCL9.
Yeah, so let's dive into that a little bit. I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. David Furman, who is the project director of the 1000 Immunomes Project. And just a brief overview of that, it is a 15-year study, the world's biggest human immunology study, if you like, and they've really characterized a number of proteins that they have taken blood samples from individuals for over 15 years. So it's really a robust study. And they've identified a number of proteins which are not your typical, interleukin-6 type of things, or the ones we know, TNF-alpha, interleukin-6, interleukin-1 beta, those sort of we know as being, that going up with age. And that what they identified was a number of other ones. And one of the key ones that they mentioned was CXCL9. And this is probably the most major player in the test. Now, they've developed a test called the IH test, and Peter and I are actually trying to see whether we can do a clinical study using the IH test. That remains to be seen whether we'll pull that one off or not. But what we want to actually achieve with this is to use the IH test to measure the response and to perhaps do a clinical study. But what comes out of the IH test is, well, they measure thousands of proteins, but there's a handful that are really key. And one of those is CXCL9. And this is a biomarker of immune aging and dysfunction, and its anti-inflammatory effects help maintain immune balance, preventing chronic inflammation that contributes to immune system degradation. And it's a very important one for the cardiovascular system, actually. And so targeting CXCL9 was something that we wanted to go after. And it so happens that carnosic acid is one of those things that lowers that CXCL9. So we were quite excited about that. And because this is a real novel thing, you talk to practitioners around the world, and 99% of them will never have ever heard of CXCL9 because it's not something that's sort of yet taught. But it is one of the emerging things that has come out of this project as being a key. And so rosemary extract has been added for that reason, to support that lowering of that. Plus, we already know of all the other benefits. It does lower NF-kappa B, does lower, which is sort of further up the food chain, if you like, of the cytokines and the TNF-alphas and interleukins and 6 of the world and all of that. And it also helps with interleukin 10 as well, doesn't it? The carnosic acid. Yeah. So anything else with the rosemary that you wanted to bring up?
I think the CXCL9 is really interesting. It's going to be a really cool area to watch over the next couple of years as more comes out on it.
Yep.
I mean, so what we know so far is that it appears to be involved in the recruitment of T cells to areas of inflammation. So really it's like that seems to be involved in that chronic activation of the immune system. And so, yeah, by bringing it down with carnosic acid that has been demonstrated, it's just going to be really interesting to see like the actual improvements of health and healthy aging from that effect. And so that's what we're really looking for that synergy, along with the IDP and Immunel, really targeting the innate and adaptive immune system.
Yeah, that's what we're targeting, both the innate and the adaptive. And, you know, the problem of thymic involution as we get older, our ability, you know, our thymus gland's ability to do what it should be doing, it's the sort of university for our immune cells, and it's sort of gone by the time you get to our age. There's not much that you can do. And yes, you could use things like peptides and stuff, or you could use Rejuvenate, because that's going to be the most effective thing that we have. And so I'm super excited about this. I think it's the combination that we've put together, and there's a couple of years worth of formulation work and a lot of scientific advice that's gone into this, and a team of people behind it. And, you know, it's really a cutting edge immune support that's going to affect the aging of the immune system. And immunosenescence, as we said, is at the basis of all 14 hallmarks of aging. So instead of putting in one or two supplements for each of the hallmarks of aging to try to attack it from that perspective, we wanted to go in at the base and go, let's support the immune system. Let's give ourselves effectively a younger immune system, right? We can't go and replace thymus glands yet, but we can effectively give ourselves a younger immune system, and through this mechanism affect all 14 hallmarks of aging. As Dr. David Furman says, that's what it does. That's why they've focused on immunosenescence as the key. So let's just open up for a few minutes now, all of us together, to share any insights. Has anyone got any comments, anything we missed out, and, you know, any things, you know, Rod, have you got any things to add after listening to the other presenters?
Yeah, I got one thing. It's been fascinating to listen to Peter and Mike talk about those other ingredients. And I was thinking back to the IDP, you know, I mentioned that they're large proteins. They don't get absorbed. They have a mucosal effect in the gut. I think the combination of that frontline surface level defense combined with these smaller molecules in these other actives that actually do get across the gut and do various signaling activities systemically, I think that's an amazing combination. I'm not sure how I bring that into the American football analogy, but you know that
we've got the super team with a big reserve bench.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you've got you know, Mike mentioned that you have the adaptive and the innate immune system, and those are very much two key parts of the immune system. But then physically, you've got this in this product, you've got this combination of those frontline defenses where viruses and bacteria and pathogens are just getting into the system, combined with the systemic effects of the signaling that goes on with the NK cells and the stem cells activation and these things Mike were just mentioned, which I can't repeat. I don't let alone write them down. I'm thinking, how do you spell that? But yeah, that's my take home from the whole conversation.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and to be able to, you know, I'm hoping that our little company will be able to do some clinical research of the synergy. We have tons of research on the individual ingredients, and future hopefully we'll be able to, you know, put some of the synergy of this formulation together. But you know, time will tell. It's how we go. Peter, what are your comments on everything?
Yeah, I guess for a sports analogy, it's kind of like the immune system is like we think of it as a fighting machine, and I've seen really good analogies to like an army of different types of you know, you've got the snipers, and you've got the SAS and you've got some communication going on, and you've got, you know, bombs which destruct everything and cause collateral.
So good.
Yeah.
So there's some very good analogies there, and Rod, I'm not sure about a rugby or a football analogy, but a 1-2 punch or a combination punch is what's going on with this formula.
Yeah.
But just to wrap up my thoughts, I'm really excited about moving away from allopathic medicine. I grew up in the pharmaceutical industry, working for multinationals in a single chemical entity to target a specific thing, and knowing that it's really primarily combating a symptom, not really getting to a root cause and not really understanding. And we know that plants and traditional medicine have been used. So we've got all this ancient wisdom that now we're using science to get to the bottom of. And if you go back even further, you know, our very survival as a species and mammals generally as a category, and it's been millions of years of an R&D project. So our bodies have been built on, you know, be functional or die. And
evolution.
so we're now using biotechnology and science and research to try and understand how it has evolved. So to me, it's a pretty exciting area.
Yeah, it is fantastic, and you put that so eloquently, and I love the whole analogy. You know, the military analogy. You know, you got your immune system coming and carpet bombing the place, and there's collateral damage everywhere. So you got to have the troops that come in and clean up the mess and rebuild the structures and repair everything, and that's what this formulation does as a whole. You know, that's the power of it, and nature is always going to be far more intelligent than we will ever be. And evolution and time that's developed these systems, like with IDP, like with colostrum. And then we, as modern day humans, have the advantage that we've got the machinery and the technology and the ways of extracting these things and actually putting them into a capsule that we can take. You know, like how gold is that? We live in a pretty exciting era when you can do that. And for me, you know, like I'm all about longevity, you know, the longevity, everything. I want health span. I want people to live long, healthy, happy lives. This is a product that is safe for pretty much everybody, including my fragile 83-year-old mum who's been through everything known to man. And I have that in her daily routine. And it's you know, she's an extraordinary case history for sure. And she's only an anecdote in a case of one, but it's cases like this that are the impetus behind some of the research, right, and the power behind. And when you look at I've had the privilege of interviewing nearly 400 scientists and doctors over the last 10 years in their respective fields of research, and a lot of them have personal stories as to why they're there, you know, as to why they're creating these incredible things that they're doing. And I think there, and when the power, even your story, Mike, you know, you've had IBD, you've fought with the terrible thing for a long time, and you've worked it out, and you've got yourself healthy through natural medicine. You know, it gives you a passion and a drive when you've experienced these things. It's certainly my driving factor, and dare say yours. And so I'm super excited for this to hit the marketplace. And of course, anybody listening to this, practitioners, think about your clients with gut health issues, aging populations, people with compromised immune systems, anyone who's got leaky gut, a SIBO, all of those types of issues that may benefit from this, antimicrobial, antibacterial, all the 4 A's, as Dr. Rod said, and more. And we, of course, are open to anyone reaching out to Aevum. We can do that. And, of course, via our friends at NutraScript, we will put all the details in the descriptions. But any final wrap-up words from anybody? Anyone got any final comments before we let you all get on with your day?
I probably should say, you know, having IBD and also, like Peter's daughter, I am dairy intolerant, but I have had no issues tolerating Aevum Rejuvenate, and I would recommend it to anyone that came into my clinic with any gut issues. I wouldn't hesitate.
Excellent. That's such gold. Well, I want to thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here today, for being so knowledgeable on all your areas. And I hope I've done a reasonable job of moderating and not losing track. There's a lot for a little brain to take in, but it's been an absolute pleasure to have you and to interview you all today. So go and check out Aevum Labs Rejuvenate. That's going to be our flagship product, and there'll be more. There'll be more things coming and more research coming. So stay tuned for more. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.